Hi folks, this is International Master John Watson, and this is the show Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is to provide players with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. You can send these questions in advance, and that's the way we usually do it through the email askimwatson@chessclub.com. Getting a little bit of feedback there. So that's ASKIMWATSON at CHESSCLUB.com. Ask I Am Watson at chessclub.com. I got a couple questions this week. I've usually gotten more, but we missed a week and then we started early last week. So please remember to send me some questions and send me your games. You can send me your games. I've got a game to start this week with. In fact, I think I have 2 games to show. And then you can also send me any sort of positions. You can send me games by yourselves or by other people. Questions about openings are the most common of all. I get a lot of talk about openings and analysis about openings. We look at classic games, master games, strategy, any questions about strategy, how to cope with different problems that you're having, time trouble or blundering or tactics. And there's always chess books, which I know quite a lot about, and which books to recommend. We have one question like that this week. So let me go over to the chat and just see who's on here. Okay, ears, that's cool. And here's the Botvinnik variation. Okay. Okay, so let me, okay, then maybe I'll hit those first. Or maybe show one game first. Let me, by the way, I put up the new things on my Facebook page, John L. Watson, 3 words, John space L space Watson. I put up the codes to the openings that we've covered for the last few shows. There's a list of all the shows going back for 2 years if you scroll down that page. Let me start with the game. Before I get to any questions, and hello everybody, let me start with this game that I was sent because it's short and easy to show and kind of fun. This game was played against the, it's Ken Hensa playing against the program Jester Chess. So here it is, regular old double E-pawn. Now he plays like a 3 knights kind of thing, and black plays bishop b4, which is maybe slightly unusual, but it's certainly been played. Sort of a reverse Ruy Lopez, but without knight f6 in. Seems to me that knight d5 might be a pretty good answer, just because you don't really want to lose your bishop pair that early, but that's just a thought. It's sort of like what black does in the Rubinstein variation of the 4 knights. But white plays very normally by playing a sort of Scotch game kind of position. And then we get to something that is familiar from the Scotch game, but is actually already, I think, a unique position, which is this crazy move. This is what Jester Chess plays. And that attacks this pawn because this knight is pinned, so it can't take back. And it resembles this very sort of famous variation and can transpose into it, which is here. Okay, now I should be back on now, hopefully, folks. Let me see what I've got here. It's no stream, it's a frozen wasteland. Very good. Okay, the speeds are fine and I'm back up and I can see myself, but I've also, my own screen is frozen. So we'll see. Give me some feedback, everybody, and see what you think. Yeah, do a refresh. And I'll just keep blathering along for a while I get some feedback. We're on this game. We're in the middle of this game. You should still see the same game up. And black plays this nice move, queen h4. This is the computer playing, threatening the e-pawn, which you can't defend with f3 because the f-pawn's pinned. And you can't defend with bishop d3 because knight takes knight would win a piece. So there's no comfortable way to defend that pawn, that e-pawn. So white plays this move, and a little more accurate might even be just here first. And then if queen takes, you have this nice option of playing the knight out here, attacking this pawn. And that's quite an attack because you're also threatening to castle with tempo on the queen and play rook e1 and attack that way. But that's just a technical point. It's kind of a fun game anyway. He does something very similar. He plays knight takes first, and black takes, check, and let me just see if there were any comments I was going to make on this. You could check. Yes, probably a little more accurate is leave that bishop on the board. Play this check. This is very similar to the game, but now take this way. And this looks terrible at first because white's going to get rook e1 in and bishop f3, but black can actually just retreat here. And leaving this bishop on is good for defensive purposes. For example, rook here, now you block off the file, and black's still a pawn up. And white has compensation here for sure, but it's not maybe more than enough. Black can still play this. This is fairly even and sort of complicated. But in the game, oh, how are we doing, by the way? You are on. Yeah, it sounds like it's okay. You know, if it's freezing up again or there's problems, just tell me, and we'll try and fix it because it's not worth just doing this in the abstract. Okay, so so here's what happens in the game. He takes that, and that's a little bit worse. It's the same idea exactly, but a little bit worse. Now black pawn, and he goes ahead and gets the queen off of the file. It makes total sense, but now white has an awful lot of compensation. He has two bishops and open files. If he tried to imitate the line I just showed you with there, and white castled, threatening rook e1 and bishop f3 and things like that, the same technique doesn't work as well for black now because black's given up this bishop for this knight and opened up this file, attacking here. Black can't castle queenside because it's illegal, and there's a threat of rook takes b7, and if he protects, then there's this move, and black's getting in big trouble because the bishop takes c6, and white's just very active here, and this would be very tough to defend. So that explains why bishop takes c3 check probably wasn't as good a move. So instead of that, black correctly plays queen takes, and just to get off of this file, and white castles, and black plays takes, and that just turns out to be too greedy. And Ken points out that this is a mistake. It's just you can't lose that much time when you're already getting attacked, and you have to be satisfied with the fact that you're a pawn ahead and you have no weaknesses and you got to get your pieces out. Now white has some compensation anyway. Probably the way this should go is something like this here, and now rook e1 check is threatened, so you don't want to lose more time with the queen. And if rook e1 check, then bishop here. And black's fairly solid here, and he's a pawn ahead, but white has the two bishops and can probably win this pawn back at some point, or win something with a move like this, for example, threatening to take here. So this is probably about even. White has compensation for a pawn, but no more. So that's what black should have done. Instead, black got greedy, and this led to a very nice little finish. Black grabbed that pawn, and white played over, which is kind of nice because now you have rook up and over. And you also have bishop here, which would win the rook in the corner. So bishop b2 is a huge threat. So black retreats, maybe not the best move, but it's kind of too late, really. White's got too many pieces out, too much attack. Retreats again, and white goes here, and now he's threatening a discovered attack with this move. Bishop here, check, winning the queen, because it's check. And so black tries sneaking over to the side. There's really nothing much better. If he plays a move like knight here, then if nothing else, we have this move, which threatens rook takes check, king takes, bishop f3 check, winning the queen. There's also ideas of bishop h3. There's also ideas of just moving the bishop and then winning this knight because the knight's pinned. So that's really overwhelming. So he tries, instead of that, he tries to run with the king, and that allows a very nice finish. Check, forcing that move, and now a very pretty move for white here. Very nice finish to the game. I'll let you have a second to look at it. Ah, good. We're doing okay, apparently. Okay, mine's freezing, which is funny, but as long as yours isn't, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to refresh mine just to see if I can get the position back. Okay, I've got mine back again, so that's good. Okay, very pretty move now, and here it is, this move. Very cute. Now, there may have been other ways to win, but this is a very, very nice one. It threatens the queen, and if black takes, then we have this check that forces queen back, and then there's a couple different mates, but the nicest one is one you should know about, which is this double check theme, which is check, takes, double check. That means the king has to move, but there's only 2 king moves, and regardless of where the king goes, there's rook e8 mate. That's a good little theme to know, that back rank theme. It's made famous in many beginners books by the game Reti Tartakower, the casual game. Budapest, it was a Budapest Gambit, a Caro-Kann. And if he doesn't take it, let's look at what happens if he doesn't take it. After rook here, if he tries to say move the queen, then we have rook takes, threatening this twice, which is just going to be a checkmate. And if queen takes, then check, and we win at least the queen, and probably followed by checkmate. Very quick checkmate. So a very pretty little game, and it's even got a few opening cues. By the way, does anybody remember that Reti Tartakower game? I'm not going to do this if I run out of something to do with, see if I can remember. This is a game they played on a ship, so it's a casual game. Oh yeah, Tartakower tried this clever move, which looks like it just loses a pawn, but his idea was to play check and then play queen takes, right? Is that right? And somehow Tartakower messed this up by playing what? I don't remember what it is now. Oh, there's a queen d3 move, I think, actually. Let me think about this. There was some sort of queen d3 idea. Anybody remember this? If anybody remembers this, just tell me. It'd be nice. The reason I want to show you is just because it's so cute. Where does that queen d3 come from? I mean, I think this would be an advantage for white for sure, because I don't think that he can afford to try to win a piece. That's just too loose. Check here. He's going to castle queenside and just simply win this game pretty quickly, I think. There's a bishop c3 threatened now. But that's not what happened. What happened somehow is there was a queenside castling. I'm afraid I'm being silly here. Oh, I know I'm being silly. Maybe he didn't play e5 right away. Hang on. Anybody remember this? Yeah, this is an interesting, a fun little game, but I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get it exactly. There's a queen d3 move at some point. And why did queen d3 happen? It's almost as though black made an extra move here, and queen d3 was the answer or something. Yeah, something like maybe here. I don't believe this, but something like this. Check here, here. And this was the theme. This is not the position, by the way, but this is the theme. That's something like, oh no, the bishop's on c8. Wrong. Okay, never mind. Huh. Well, shucks. It would be really nice to be able to do this properly. Let's try one more time. Check. Surely anybody would play bishop d2 here. I feel like there was a queen d3 somehow, somewhere in the along the line here. Well, folks, this isn't going to work. The basic theme, I can show you kind of what the basic theme, I'll cheat to get to the basic theme. The basic theme was something like, let's just say he wastes time here, black counterattacks, white goes here, and then when black takes this, whoops, if black took this here, for example, then I believe queen d8 would be made. That was the basic theme anyway. It's a very cute little theme, because after check here, there's a double check, and the idea is this is normal looking. That's fairly normal, but then there's a unique mate after this, which is really kind of cute. Bishop here, a very cute little mate. That's not how Tartakower already went, but that was the idea. That was the tactic. I don't try this at home because I gave you the wrong moves, but you can look it up too. It's a really short little miniature, very cute, and it did start with a Caro-Kann, but I have something slightly wrong. But anyway, this is the idea. This is very cute little mate. Okay, why are we, I'm getting way off subject here. Now, let me see. Let me go back to the chat and see what people have said. Hi, I really like the Botvinnik Slav variation from the Slav. Is there a way to kind of force white into it. Let's see what he's talking about here. Okay, so the Botvinnik variation of the Slav basically goes like, it's a semi-Slav, and it goes like, for example, here, here, and then black takes, and white attacks in the center, and black simply defends, and white attacks and black counterattacks, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. Okay, and then one of the big main lines is this, taking, and you get your piece back, but it's very complicated and wild, and has been worked out to no end. Now the question is, can you force that? Well, the answer really is no, not absolutely not, because white has so many other ways of playing. For example, you can play there, and there goes your Botvinnik variation, right? Because after it takes, the person's going to just take back. And this is called the Moran variation, especially if you play here. Now we're in a Moran variation. It's a very famous line. We've talked about this a little bit on the show before, these kind of positions. You can avoid the Moran. That's an anti-Moran playing that way. You can even play Shirov's move here, G4. Or actually Shabalov originally. It's his move, I think. So no, you can't really force a semi-Slav. You can play the triangle. There's different orders you can try. For example, you can play a triangle system on the grounds that after that you're happy with doing something else, like for example this, and play a Stonewall. So there are move order ways to kind of discourage white from avoiding that. Now if you play here, you can play a Notaboom right away. This is the Notaboom variation. And then if white played I don't know, here, and you played here, we'd be back in a some sort of semi-Slav. Like this would be a Botvinnik variation, right? Right here. And so we'd have this. But you really can't force it. I guess playing a triangle variation is probably your best bet in a way, because otherwise white has quite a few options. For example, in this position, white can play. White certainly doesn't have to play bishop g5 here. White can also play g3, for example. White can play, as I say, e3, which is one of the main moves. There's really no way to force it. To avoid problems, maybe I would play this triangle move order first, because then after here, at least you have this extra idea. And that's sort of if you trust what the so-called Notaboom variation, which goes something like here, attacking that, black defends. And this is a fun line, at least. It's got a lot of content to it. And if pawn up, then for example bishop here, and if captures bishop d2, black can play here, with the idea of playing b4. Now b4 immediately is not a threat because the bishop takes b4, but after b3, trying to win this pawn takes pawn, bishop takes, would totally favor white with a huge lead in development. Black can defend his rook, and now there's no more bishop takes b4. So it's even material, and black has these two passed pawns on the queen side, and white has the center. That's called the Notaboom variation. I'd probably look into playing something like that. If you want to have dynamic, interesting play against every move order, the minute you play knight f6, you're probably not going to get it. I guess the point is that after e3 now, you don't really have to play knight f6. You've got a few more options than usual, and one of them, as I say, is this, which is at least fun. And it's a Stonewall Dutch where white has played the move e3, which he might not really want because it cuts off his bishop, and it doesn't go very well with the g3 anti-Stonewall either. So this is, I mean, white's fine here. White's got plenty of plans here to play, and I actually even would probably rather be white here, but it's maybe if you want to play interesting chess, this might be your best move order deal if you want to get the Botvinnik Slav or some alternative. Okay, then what was the next question? Okay, all the things about the stream not working. That ain't no stream, it's a frozen wasteland. All right, I guess everything's working. At least that's something good. Okay, now let me just keep going here. I got a question about a general question. A chess friend of mine, will be giving some lessons to a 10-year-old who's probably about an 800 rate. What books could you recommend? Any other suggestions? So anyway, I mostly teach advanced players, so I asked John Hartman about this, who's on this stream a lot. And John teaches a lot of kids and talks a lot about books. He writes the book review column for Chess Life. So he does a lot of teaching. He teaches in camps, and so he knows a lot about lower level players and beginners. And he says that the Dutch Step Method series volume 1 would be very appropriate for the it's called the Steppen Method, but it's also just called the Dutch Step Method series. You can find it pretty easily if you Google it. It's sold by the United States Chess Federation, and you can use volume 1. What it does is it steps you through all the way through theoretically to master, and you could use the volume 1. He says he also likes to use game collections as teaching tools generally. I think that's a very good idea, so people can see a whole game, so kids can see a whole game in some unified way. For checkmates and tactics, which are absolutely crucial, obviously, for an 800 player, he recommends several books. Renaud and Kahn's The Art of the Checkmate, John Bain's Chess Tactics for Students, Sergei Ivanchuk's Chess School 1A and 1B, that's two different books, and Fred Wilson's Simple Attacking Chess. Those are 4 books he mentioned. I'm sure there's a lot more. I'm sure you guys have some. I'm sure you guys have some options for that you'd like to do. So you can make suggestions on the chat if you want to. But those are some books that might get you started. Let me see. Going back here, Alan came in. By the way, Alan, your texts. You've got these texts to my phone, and you show the board, but the board gets cut off. So you really want to use email instead. The texts to the phone aren't really working. I can't see the position. In other words, no matter what I try to do with the display. Okay, Alan asks, what's the modern rule of the position of the clock if you're left-handed? Well, I am left-handed. Well, I'm not really left-handed, but I'm left-handed because I have a disability in my right hand. So most tournaments these days, if they're tournaments where your board might be on a DGT board, or even one where the director wants to see all the clocks set up in a certain position and the boards are set up beforehand, you don't have much choice, and you don't get a choice about where the clock is, because the director has the blacks and whites set up on boards in advance, and he wants to see the clock from a certain angle, and so you won't get that much choice. But in casual tournaments or a lot of other tournaments, what will happen is you can simply say before the game, yeah, I've got this problem. Most people will be glad to have you hit the clock with your left hand, because that'll mean they're hitting it with their right hand. So that'll be perfect, and most people are right-handed. So I usually just ask my opponent, we say yes, it's fine. But as I say, if you're, for example, on the stage, like I was at the U.S. Open, and they won't let you switch, because they've got it set up for the director to be most convenient to look during time trouble and to settle disputes and that sort of thing. Hey, I'm getting frozen again. I hope you guys aren't. But I would always just ask at any given tournament, I just ask my opponent if it's okay. Now, traditionally, black gets a choice of where to put the clock, so you can put it on your left, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think that's been overwritten by the desires of the director. But generally, black would get the choice of where to put the clock. I'm not seeing anything on the chat, and that worries me a little bit. Are you guys still hooked in here? I'm going to send a little message out. Let me just try something here. I see I'm getting frozen again. I hope you guys aren't. Now, I actually get frozen fairly often, even when the stream is working, so I don't know what that's about. I think it has to do with the fact that I'm on the same computer that I'm. Okay, good. Things seem to be going well. So let me get back to where we are. All right, so now we have another game maybe, or let me see. Okay, here's something from last week's chat that I thought was pretty interesting. Do you think it's a good idea to play D3 in the Grand Prix? This is the kind of question I get from students. The Grand Prix attack of the Sicilian goes like this. It goes here, and then F4. And he's saying, do you think it's a good idea? Let me just show you some extra moves. For example, here and here and here. And that makes this question make more sense. He says, do you think it's a good idea to play 2 D3 instead of 2 knight C3 in the Grand Prix to avoid playing knight C3 and having an extra move on the big plan? Now, his idea of the big plan, he explains, is to play D3 and get castled and play F5 and go for checkmate. But without bishop C4 in, that's not a very dangerous plan generally. So it's possible he means 3 D3. I'm wondering if that's the possibility. I wonder if he's thinking let's play 2f4, and then, for example, I'm not sure if this is the question, but then get the bishop out and don't play knight c3. So, for example, if you were trying to get your sort of standard attack going, it would be something like here, and then let's have black make a slow move. Well, maybe black plays there. Let me just see something here. Let's say black plays some move that's not too impressive. The idea of playing f5 and then coming over with the queen to one of these squares and the bishop out here. And he's saying maybe I can save the move knight c3. Maybe that's the point he's making. Because if you play d3 on the second move, it's certainly a legitimate plan. You can still play f4. It's well known. And you can play this. And usually what white does in these positions is he fianchettos the bishop. He doesn't play bishop e2. He can't play bishop c4 anymore, which is where bishop b5 or c4 would be the normal Grand Prix moves. But yeah, you could still play this way, like a Dutch maybe. And for example, something like this, and then queen here and try and sneak over to this side of the board, play for f5, and maybe try to get something like bishop h6 in. This attack is basically not very sound. It just there aren't enough pieces over there, and you don't have the bishop coming along that nice diagonal, and that doesn't help. So the question isn't completely clear, but I wanted to mention a few things about it. One is that if you play 2f4 instead of the normal here, and then f4, if you decide to play 2f4, you should all be aware of the fact that that's still got a very nice reputation. If white advances here, the idea is that black gets his bishop out in front of what's going to be his French pawn chain. And that's very nice because he gets to play e6 like a French without even having a bad bishop. And if white takes, because after all there is a threat of taking here, if white takes, it's true that black doesn't want to recapture the queen because he loses time, although that's maybe okay for black, but it's not great. The problem is black can play here and retake with the knight, and now this move f4 looks really kind of weak. White has really good control of the center. And the reason all this works is because if you play c4, then black can play a gambit. This is called, I think, the Iceland, maybe, something like that. And here black's 2 pawns ahead in development. White has huge weaknesses on these squares, and black has complete control over d4 on an open file, and that's considered plenty of compensation. Okay, so that's why you can't play 2d4. Well, you can play 2f4, but it's not particularly, this d5 is really a problem. It's a problem response. So, so I don't know, maybe that answers that question at least a little bit anyway. So, and by the way, that main line, the one with 2 knight c3, the one he was talking about goes something like, the one where that standard attack tends to happen is something like this. Let me just make some moves. And then, for example, this move f5. Or you might even wait one more move, and then queen e1. For example, queen e1, if he castled now, which probably wouldn't be the best move, then f5 starts a pretty serious attack. This is a pretty reasonable attack. Black can still counterattack with d5. It's still just a game, but at least it's very interesting. So that's what he was talking about by standard attack, but you really need the bishop out there to put extra pressure on the position. Okay, so let's go back to the chat for a second. There has been freezing. Interesting. Yeah, my streaming theoretically has been doing well, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. That could be actually a YouTube problem, or something to do with our connection with YouTube, obviously, but something that is really beyond my control here. What else do we have here? Let me see. Oh, here's another game sent by a reader. I wanted to get to some of these games, so let me try that. Let me try this. Here's a game sent by a reader that I don't think, I hope I didn't already get to this one, but I'm pretty sure I didn't. Hang on. Okay, here we go. So, and do I have notes on this? I had a few notes that were, I thought, but mainly it's just for fun. Anybody who wants to send their game and have me take a look, it's worth a try. I don't guarantee I'm going to show them all, but I'll try and show as many as I can. This ends up being an exchange variation of the French defense. This is Guthman Sachen, and Sachen is the player of black who sent the game. Okay, so this is just an exchange variation. That's kind of a slow move, h3. In fact, black might want to consider playing bishop d6 to be more active, but bishop e7 is fine. That's a move. Now, that's a typical move where there's really no reason to do that yet. I mean, I guess it depends how you want to set up your pieces, but if you're going to castle here anyway, which he was, it turns out black was, you might as well castle first because you don't know yet where that bishop's going to go. You might want to attack the center first before you do anything else, and then you'll find out what the best square for the bishop is. You kind of know better where some of the other things are. Well, white isn't trying to play very fast anyway. That's probably to stop the move knight g5, which means maybe he didn't really want to put that bishop on e6. Okay, so both sides are just developing. It's a fairly even game. That's a preparation for the move c5. You could just play c5 right away, or castles and then c5. There's really no, you don't really need to prepare it. Small points, these are not big deals. Okay, now finally black does play c5. Good idea, because otherwise black has really no counterplay, and white has just a little more space, a little more play. And taking on a isolated pawn is just fine in these positions because there's not much pressure on that pawn. Maybe white has a tiny advantage, but it's very small. White would like to bring a knight here and maybe put a knight here and see if he can slowly but surely make a little bit of progress. Black should probably think about putting a knight on that square, or at least arranging to put a knight on that square. First thing he does is he tries to stop the move b4. I don't know if that's necessary, but he also gains a little space on the queen side, and that's always a good idea. Okay, now he's thinking about attacking b2. White defends. And black exchanges these off. Now, that is black's good bishop, and he would like to contest these dark squares, so maybe that's not, to my mind, that's not really the best of moves, but I would think better would be just bring a rook into the center, or to e8, or try to put a knight onto that square. Not so easy. Maybe white's just better by this point, because black hasn't really played actively enough to justify having an isolated pawn. Anyway, here's what happens. You know, white could have, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so black goes back to exchange. The only problem with exchanging queens when you have a bad bishop and an isolated pawn like that is you're going to suffer for a long time. A winning endgame, but he doesn't take it. White should probably just take that off. Simplification is going to help white here. Okay, black played back and white took that. Now that gets rid of black's bad bishop, and it does leave bishop versus knight in the endgame, which is nice, but it's not that big a deal, and it actually increases black's control of the center to some extent. So I think what white should do here, this is a good position to kind of look at a little bit, but a very nice move for white here is to play here, with the idea of coming up here, and maybe even using that f5 square for a knight. You could also put the knight there, but the knight on e3 also attacks d5, and then you can put the other rook over on an open file, and all your pieces are ideally placed. I mean, just for example, if black played a slow move and you played here, that's just a very nice, comfortable position. Say black made an extra move to defend his pawn and white went over here. See, open file, black still got the worst bishop, and white's knights are very nicely poised and might kind of come over to this side of the board to attack also. So that's the ideal sort of structure. Black get two center pawns to none. Now, white still has a decent game because those center pawns can't both advance easily, but it's only a very small advantage, and now white really makes it easier for black. Black could just start advancing this pawn. I think he should have actually. And white should stop that. White should play a move like this to make sure he controls those squares, because otherwise black's got a 2-to-1 mobile central majority and should definitely play this move. That's an excellent move right now. I mean, maybe only equal, because white does have, he's restraining the center pretty well, and he does have that bishop versus the knight, which is always some advantage. But I think it's equal. Anyway, black played here, and let's just see if we can buzz through this a little bit. Okay, black starts advancing on the queen side. Maybe b4 immediately was an idea. Both sides are just putting pieces out to logical places. Nobody's taking any chances. And then up here, attacking this. And of course, that means that black could just defend this. He's probably doing okay here. There's no way to win this pawn by force. But instead, he gets ambitious. and plays e5, and that's maybe okay, but it leaves this pawn a little bit weak. White plays here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if these are the best moves, but it's worth kind of taking a look anyway. And on here, it looks at first sight like Black's got a good game because he's got more space in the center, and his rooks are on open files, which is nice. The problem is these pawns are a little loose. It's almost like Black needs a couple of moves to really consolidate those pawns. White plays their good move, attack the weak pawn. That's a bit of a weak pawn. White defends it, white attacks again. I think maybe a little, oh, excuse me, my fault. Well, I'm gonna have to zoom through these moves. I don't have any way of getting back to that position. Okay, so it gives you a chance to see all this again. So white should probably get this move knight e3 in at this point. Make this move knight e3. Instead he tries to attack the pawn with the queen, which is also okay. And then Black really tries something ambitious. The obvious move is just to defend this pawn. For example, something like this, because if rook takes, you have this fork. He probably does. So that would be the way to play it. Instead, he sacrifices a pawn, and it's a dynamic idea. It's got some point to it, but I'm not sure if it's actually completely sound. White takes that. That's really a mistake. What white should do is just take this. And I think what white was thinking was that somehow, let me see what Black was thinking, was that he would penetrate down here. But the problem is if Black takes back, for example, it just loses because it's only one check. There's no mating attack here. There's no big attack here. So the e4 move really should just take here. And the game wouldn't be over, but it would be not good. Instead he took here. It's an exciting game, and Black took there. Maybe even better would be to play here, because after b3, which is pretty forced, then that's with tempo, and you're threatening the rook takes c3. So Black's already got more than enough for a pawn here. Okay, Black centralizes, white threatens the b pawn. Black takes these off, and white now is trying to get all his pawns in the queen side going. And actually, this is pretty much dead even at this point, because white hasn't gotten any more passed pawns than Black does. So this game ended in a draw. There's something like 90 moves, but I think we can stop here. It's kind of a fun game. Okay, Alan. Oh, here are some new questions. What do we have here? We have people are using H3 and everything, like putting ketchup on everything these days. That's true. A lot of H3s, a lot of G4 still. G4 started about 15, 20 years ago, and it's still going on. Did you see the most recent G4? Not most recent, but pretty recent G4 thing. This 3-3 move is a move I used to make, just to kind of play a Sicilian reverse and see what happened. Now, if you come, I agree with your computer liking knight c6 or any move really. I think there are probably other ways to play that position too. Okay, tell me if things pop up again. The irony here is that mine is not popping up again. Ah, wait, no, I've got a completely random position from a long time ago up there. Now that really is odd. That is truly odd. Oh, just a huge delay. Oh my goodness. So we're back at that E3 thing that you guys were talking about. That's where I am. Is that where you guys are too? And now I'm in Alan's position with the bishop H4 and that. So let me start over again with that, with Alan's game. Okay, so we're talking about the Peart's defense, the so-called Byrne variation. That's the Peart's defense with G6. This is almost like a King's Indian against E4. White plays that. That's called the Byrne variation. And I was trying to point out that with Bishop G5, and let's see if this shows up. I hope it shows up. This was my repertoire suggestion for White in my ICC lecture series on a repertoire for White. I actually really liked it. A lot of people have played since then and told me about their games and done pretty well. I think Black has to really know what he's doing here. Okay, so Alan just defended, and then this very ambitious move F4. You don't really need to play F4 yet. You can just play a simple move like Queen D2, for example. It's a good move. But F4 is okay. And then Alan played H6. Let me go back and make sure I get the order right, actually, with what he played. Let me go back. H6, bishop h5, c5. And I was pointing out to Alan that c5 was not the, I hope this is working by the way. I was pointing out to Alan that c5 is not the only move here. You can simply castle because this move is not that dangerous, I don't think. Well, for one thing, this square is hanging. Whenever you've got the option of playing there with tempo, threatening knight e3, then that's probably good enough to equalize. Something like here, here, and then maybe break up the center like that. Now, I don't know, maybe white's better here, but I don't see why he would be. There's a threat of taking, and if white takes, you know, this guy's hanging and black has the better center. So, and also the king's stuck here, so that wouldn't be good at all. So actually, queen d2 is actually not the move, is it? I don't know what would white might want to play something like this just to get out of the way so that on c5 he has a chance to play castles queenside. Big mess. I think black's probably just fine here. Okay, so that's so there's no hurry to play this move c5, Alan. But it works out okay. I think white probably normally would just take here, but instead he plays this very aggressive move, and black plays out like that. Now you could still play here, couldn't you? You'd probably still play there. It's total mess. There's such a mess. There's so many moves here. There's captures, there's check. The thing about check is that you can't play there because this piece is hanging. So you'd have to play king f8 or something, which is not what you want. So I guess knight g4 isn't very good. You played knight h5. Probably that's why too. Good thinking. And white played knight d5, and you give that a question mark. And I think you're absolutely right. White has no time to do things like this. He needs to be either breaking up the center or getting more pieces out. This is the usual move, something like this. Because now if he tries to get the pawn back that way, the king's stuck in the center, and white catches up in development and goes ahead in development. And I think white's pretty happy here. White's got a nice little initiative, although this is maybe playable for black. But so what black would do instead of that would be just develop knight c6 or knight takes f4. Probably just knight c6. You don't mind losing a pawn here because you're breaking up a center so fully that losing a pawn is not going to kill you. Something like I guess takes. Yeah, maybe white is better here. It's hard to say. I think black's going to end up a pawn down, but these guys are so weak. And black's going to have the bishop pair, so black should be okay here. It's just fascinating stuff. Okay, anyway, in the game, instead of this, white went knight d5, and Alan points out the computer just gives there, and then this has become a wasted move. You've got bishop e6 next. Let me go and see about the chat, see if you guys are seeing any of this. I got that same question. Hi, I really like the Botvinnik variation from the Slav as the way to kind of force white into that. Yeah, I talked about that in some detail at the beginning of the video. So after the show's over, you can just go back and look at that. How are we doing on the frozen issue? I noticed that my own screen is getting frozen after this move, knight d5. I hope yours isn't. Yeah, when I refresh it, I'm okay. So now white's wasted too much time. Black's ahead in development. Black's got ideas of takes g5. He's got ideas of just taking here or knight takes here. This is not a good position. I suspect you could also play a move like this because knight takes here is just sort of a big old self-pin here. And you always have queen a5 check if you need it. So, and bishop takes, it looks suicidal after check, but I'm not sure because bishop takes is going to happen. Okay, good, Alan. So the question is, so was there a question or we just want to show it to us? That's interesting you're playing these crazy games. They're fun. It's fun to play this stuff. And you get better and better at getting the timing down. Oh, we'll show you what Alan played. You guys never got to see that. He's not going to be happy with this. What he played was D takes E, which is probably fine. But then he tried temporarily sacrificing a piece, and that probably just loses. That move is just a bad move. What he was trying to do, he played here. Now he played queen takes. He's almost got to try something like check, just to try and hold on here, and then play g5. But then there's knight here attacking this bishop. So you're going to lose a piece. White's a piece down. I mean, black's a piece down. What happened in the game was even worse. It was takes, g5 trying to get the piece back, knight d5, and the problem is you don't have time to take here because that's checkmate in 2 moves. You don't even take the rook, you get the king instead. So that's what happened in the game. So a tragedy, but interesting. All kinds of common Peart's themes appear in that analysis, but it does show you have to be very careful about counting on this knight takes h5, g5 idea. It's a good idea, but you've got to time it right. So, okay, good. Now let's see what's going on with everything. We're actually past the time already. Okay, Raman asks, what do you think of this line? Let's take another look. I'll skip this other stuff I have from last week. We'll make this our last thing. Raman asks e4, e6, d4, d5, another French, another exchange. Knight c3. Now, if you want to, by the way, as black, you can go bishop b4, go into a winnower variation. That's just a standard winnower variation. But he plays knight f6, which is absolutely fine. Bishop e3, a little passive. Bishop d6 is nice and active. That's a good move. Queen d2. Castles, castles. Yeah, you know, this is fun for white to try something like this just because we've got opposite colored castling going on. I think black's fine here because this is all very kind of slow. And there's no real attack yet. You'd have to probably try and get something like this going. And maybe h4, h5, things like that to have any real pressure here. So black's got plenty of time to sort of consolidate. I think the question is, what do you think for white? He's asking. Yeah, good. Thank you for clarifying that. It's worth a try. You could play it in a game. It's not. I'm sure you can't be too much worse. I don't think you're better here. I just think because black's playing so solidly. Black can always just play this, followed by this kind of attack. That's what I would probably do as black. You can also just develop to kind of prevent bishop d3 from being a good attacking move. The only thing about that is now maybe we can get a tempo to continue our little attacking idea. To me, that's white's most promising idea, is to attack that way with g4. So actually bishop f5 might be just a mistake or not a very good move. What else can black do? Black can just, you know, get a piece out and see what white's plan is. What is white's plan? I guess that's one question, Raman. You might want to ask what white's best plan is here if black just makes a simple developing kind of move. I'd be a little scared of getting attacked on the queen side. Let me show you the kind of line I'd be afraid of. Here, now how does white attack? Maybe that's the first thing we've got to decide. If he plays here, just to aim at the king side, black plays here. White maybe develops a piece or something. Black might just play here with the idea of playing here and getting a big attack going, or try a fairly big attack. You know, white's still right in the game. There's no big deal, but it's not clear to me how white's attacking. Like I say, the attack I prefer is this one, but it's awfully slow. In other words, it would go something like here, here, here. Now, do you want to stop knight c4? You really can't stop knight c4, so you might as well just keep attacking here. Maybe maybe this move. And if knight c4, just take that. But then you have to deal with the b file and queen out and maybe bishop here. I guess I prefer black here slightly. It's a game. This knight probably should swing around back that way as you start your attack over here. A little hard to get coordinated, isn't it? I don't know if Romer has any Grandmaster games to look at this variation. No, I don't think white plays this. I don't think you'll find any Grandmasters playing this as white. The idea is not that bad. Let me show you what the idea, a better version of this idea might be, and one you might actually find someone playing. Okay, so knight c3, knight f6. I think bishop g5 here would be the way you would get this position. This move. And if black played something like this, then this move, and if black played this. Now the difference here is you're going to make weaknesses over here on the king side. You've got targets on the king side. You're more active. That bishop on e3 wasn't very active. So if we looked up this position, there's a decent chance we could find it in Megabase or something like that. And if we didn't find this one, we'd find one with this bishop here or this knight here. But we'd find a very similar kind of position. And this one I like a little better because I still want to play bishop here, and I want to play f6 and start attacking on the king side, but my bishop's more active. And if he castles, he's kind of walking into this sort of attack too, because this move tends to lose, or tends to be very, very dangerous because the bishop takes h6 ideas. Now, I don't know if you can play it right away. You might be able to, actually. But you can always retreat to e3 and then play bishop takes h6 later. That's kind of interesting. It means the knight can't move because of check. Probably this is premature because of bishop f8 coming next. Yeah, okay, this is too early. But you can just come back, like there or something. Or even retreat, like this. And this move tends to be extremely risky. This is almost always winning for white. It's already immediately at least a draw because you have check, and if back you have check again. But this one's even better because at this point you would just play this move, for example, threatens to come up and start checkmating. I mean, like if he plays slowly, for example, you can just lift this rook, and then it looks like he's getting out, but he isn't, because after check, you just give up that rook, and now you have this mate coming this way. So it's a very risky line. Let me put it that way. Very risky. So after bishop h4, you really couldn't play g5. You'd have to play some sort of slower move like this. And white can consider attacking here. You know, some sort of even I wonder if g4 is a move. Or is that too crazy? A little crazy. The idea is g5. And if he tries to play here now, it's the same problem. We still have bishop takes g5. Anyway, there's some ideas for you to play around with. If you're going to look it up on a computer, I don't think you'll find one after bishop e3 because that's too slow. You'll see a position after bishop g5. Okay. Yeah, no, it doesn't really work that way though, Raman. Yeah, that's good. Very good. Excellent point. You're trying not to play bishop g5 because you want to play g4, g5. The problem with that is that there's too many positive advantages to having it in there to begin with. It limits him. It forces black to do something, to react to the fact that there's a pin there, which makes it much more difficult. And once black starts reacting, you get new targets in. Let's see if I can explain that. Let's say black did nothing, and you played your sort of standard attacking idea. Maybe start with this move. And now after that move, I kind of like playing the rook over so that you have a place for the knight to come in. There, for example, here. And that's maybe one way to try and play it. I'm not sure. Boy, I'll tell you, I'd have to look at this more carefully because there's so many options for both sides. And now maybe we want to just start throwing that at him. And let's say he tries to get rid of that bishop. I'm thinking it's almost time to start throwing all the pawns to that side of the board. And then you're thinking about just taking and playing g5. But I have to admit, none of this is that impressive to me. Yeah. I see what you're saying. You want that back there so that you don't have anything in the way of this, but I just think, I know from my experience that it's harder as black to play against the bishop already pinning the knight because it puts some pressure on your position. But, so yeah, I'd say, yeah, it's worth giving a whirl, but don't get too passive, that's all. Okay, what if bishop g4 for black? What on the 8th move? Which move would that be? That would be after, for example, let me see, white's move. I don't remember what I was doing here. What was I doing for white? Say white moves there. Yeah, you could play bishop g4. Possible idea about coming around back here, but I think that encourages white's attack. See, it encourages him to get all these up here. Then you take this. Now you're ready for h4, h5. So this would actually be a case where white's pretty happy. Actually, black would take this way because he needs the room. He can't afford h4, h5 without at least getting that file and some squares over there. So it's an interesting position. My guess is this is still about even, but at least white has some nice attacking chances. You want to be careful about this diagonal becoming a problem, so you probably want to move over. And then just start attacking. See what you can get. Now black wants to be able to take and try and force white to take back with the pawn, not open the file. So black will move this queen either to a5 or c7. And now h5 doesn't make as much sense because once you take it, you take this way. Although even now you have this file potentially. It's an interesting position. I'd say about even. Interesting, double-edged. Both sides are going to attack on both sides of the board. It's an exciting position. So I'd say, yeah, go ahead and play this. Definitely. Okay, I guess that's about it. Because of these delays on the freezing of the board, I have to apologize. Mine's sort of doing the spinning dial thing again. So we'll look at this next week. We'll practice beforehand and making sure that it's not freezing up. But I think it's just some combination of the YouTube connection, because I don't think it's my internet, because it seems to be functioning really well. One last thing it looks like here. Can you talk a bit about the Jacques-Chittard attack against the French? Someone made a video about it. It looked very strong. Yeah, we've talked several times on this show about the Jacques-Chittard. Let me just show it again. This is the Jacques-Chittard attack. It's the classical variation with knight f6 for black. And white, instead of playing e5 and going into, for example, the Steinitz variation, plays here. And then black, instead of playing what's called the classical bishop e7, although the terminology is always very strange about these things, plays, oh, I'm sorry, he does play here. He could play the McCutcheon also, or he can play d takes c4, for example. And now white plays here, and black plays black. And this is the normal classical line if white plays takes, takes. But instead, white plays h4. One problem with playing the Jacques-Chittard as white is that there's so many lines. I mean, accepting is perfectly legitimate, just taking the pawn. And originally, white played this move. This is how Alekhine played it. He played there and had the idea of playing the queen up and the knight out and attacking on the king side. Nowadays, people play this move. They play queen d3 right away with the idea of rook takes h7 to win a tempo against white. Try to force white to play an awkward move like that. That's the idea. And then you'll still go queenside, and you'll still be attacking, maybe with f4, maybe with knight up and on the dark squares. But you start out with queen d3, so you have a direct threat. The only problem with the Jacques-Chittard that's so difficult is that that's a legitimate move. Whoops, excuse me. That's a legitimate move. I know because I write about the Jacques-Chittard in the chess publishing column, and I have had I probably annotated 30 games or so, I would guess. And all these moves are impossible to refute. That's still a move that's possible because after taking, you don't take with the queen when knight b5 is quite strong. You take with the king, and this is a playable position as well. Although maybe this one, well, yeah, this is considered playable still, I believe. This is for black. You can also play a move that many people played, which is this, preparing c5 without worrying about this knight b5 idea. I guess the moves I would pay most attention to, there's also a knight c6, knight b6 kind of idea. For example, after you take, by the way, that's one of the ways black sometimes plays this. Black plays, queen d3, g6, maybe knight f3, queen e7, castles. Sometimes black sets up with knight b, doesn't play any of his queenside pawns up. He plays like that and castles, which sometimes means giving back that pawn here. And it's even material, but black has nice queenside play. That's another way to play it. So there's a lot to look at with the Jacques-Chittard. Hu Yifan plays it as white and has played it repeatedly. And she's playing some of the top players in the world. And she's the women's world champion, or was best women's player in the world. And that's a good indication that it's sound for white. It's not bad. The question is whether you can actually earn an advantage and whether you want to play. You have to take a look at the specific lines and see if they appeal to you. But as I say, maybe the ones that I would be most worried about are h6, castles. Castles is a underrated move. I think for a long time, black didn't want to castle into the attack, but it turns out that it's actually just it's a pretty useful move. And the immediate c5 you have to look at too, of course. So, but I think you'll be happy. Acceptance, I think you get an equal game anyway, maybe even slightly better than equal with that move. That, by the way, was Johnny Hector's, the first one I ever saw play that. I think he kind of invented this idea. Because it's so natural to attack the queen directly, the way Alekhine did. But playing this first gives you an extra time. And this move is also kind of unconvincing because, for one thing, there's g4, g5 sometimes. Also, some of these positions, you look for the move knight b5 too, just to kind of mess him up. Like, for example, if he played here now, or so, well, no, that wouldn't work because it takes a knight d5. If he played here, I wouldn't be surprised if the move knight b5 wasn't at least interesting, with the idea of playing queen c3 or queen g3. Not sure, but the answer to the question is yeah, it's definitely playable, but you've got to do some studying. I don't know that particular video, I don't think, so I'm not sure Okay. How do you deal with all the pronunciations? Just, yeah. Llewellyn, like Fluellen, right? It's like Fluellen in Shakespeare. Hopefully you hear, I do so much reading and studying that I actually don't hear people's names pronounced very much. So I only learn them very slowly over the course of a lot of conversations, and I often get them wrong when it's a name I first the first appears to me. The classic names you've heard so often, and you've heard conversations about their pronunciation so often that you usually, yeah, Nepomniachtchi. All I remember is the chi part. You got to get both those chi-chis in, but how you really pronounce that, I have no idea. Maybe you do, Ears. It'd be interesting to see how these top players pronounce it. They tend to just say Nepo. That's right. They tend to not give his name because they don't want to embarrass themselves. So I think that's kind of chicken. They ought to actually give it a whirl. So, all right, folks, that's about it. I'm sorry about the streaming issue. We will look at it for next week and try to make sure it doesn't happen again. And we'll experiment with it and see what happens. I kind of have a feeling it's a one-time thing, and we won't have this problem because we've been doing streaming shows, for 6 or 7 years now, and haven't had this issue. So, well, there's always some kind of issue, isn't there? So, and we have had this issue before, actually, periodically. Once in a while, it'll stop. I think today was worse than usual, though. Thank you, everybody, and please send your games and your ideas and your questions and your opening questions to askimwatson@chessclub.com. Once again, that's ASKIMWATSON@CHESSCLUB.com. And I hope to talk to all of you next week. Bye-bye.